In the spring of 1934, a mine foreman named Walter Creasy withdrew every dollar he had saved in 14 years of underground work from a savings account at the First National Bank of Uniontown, Pennsylvania. The withdrawal was documented. The amount was $462. In 1934, that was 7 months of wages for a working man. Creasy did not buy land with it. He did not buy equipment. He did not pay a debt. He hired a mason, a cement supplier, and 2 labourers, swore them individually to silence, and used every cent to seal a passage at the base of the Harwick Number Four shaft that the Fayette Coal and Coke Company had never officially opened and had never officially closed. The passage was not on any company map. The company did not know it existed, or if they knew, they had decided some time before 1934 that knowing was a liability they preferred not to carry. Creasy knew it existed because he had found it in the winter of 1931 during a routine inspection of the lower workings after a partial collapse. He had told no one for 3 years, and then, in the spring of 1934, something changed. Something made him decide that finding it was no longer enough. Something made him spend money he could not afford to spend to make sure that whatever was down there stayed down there. He never explained why. What we have instead is the withdrawal record, the names of the men he hired, and a single entry in his personal ledger dated April 14, 1934, that reads in full, "The matter below the 4th level is settled. It will not trouble anyone now." That sentence is the beginning of this investigation. Before we go further, if this is the kind of history they never put in the textbooks, the kind that lives in ledger books and sealed shafts and the personal accounts of men who knew enough to be afraid, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell. Every week this channel goes into the primary sources. The withdrawal records, the company archives, the letters that sat in courthouse basements for 90 years before anyone thought to look. This is one of those stories. Stay with it. To understand what Walter Creasy did and why the act itself is so significant, you have to understand what a mine foreman was in 1934 Pennsylvania and what he was not. The bituminous coal country of Fayette County sat in the southwestern corner of the state, hard against the West Virginia border, in a landscape of ridgelines and river valleys that had been producing coal since before the Civil War. By 1934, the industry was in the deepest depression it had ever seen. The Great Depression had gutted coal prices. Mines were closing across the region. Men who had worked the same seam for 20 years were being laid off in batches. The ones who kept their jobs kept them by being indispensable, and a foreman's indispensability rested entirely on one thing: his relationship with the company. A foreman did not own anything underground. He did not make decisions about what was explored or what was sealed. Every passage, every chamber, every foot of horizontal drift was the legal and operational property of Fayette Coal and Coke. If a foreman discovered something anomalous below the 4th level in 1931, his job, his only legitimate job, was to report it up the chain of command, document it in the shift log, and wait for instructions. Walter Creasy did not do that. For 3 years, he inspected the lower workings twice weekly, noted nothing unusual in any official record, and kept whatever he had found entirely to himself. This was not negligence. This was a decision made deliberately and maintained at professional risk for 36 consecutive months. A foreman who concealed a structural feature from his company in 1930s Pennsylvania was a foreman who could be dismissed without recourse, blacklisted from the industry, and in certain circumstances prosecuted. Creasy understood this. He was not a careless man. The same ledger that contains the April 1934 entry contains 3 years of meticulous shift records, equipment logs, and safety notations in a hand that is orderly and precise. Whatever he found in the winter of 1931 was significant enough to override 3 years of professional caution and then prompt him to spend his life savings to contain it. The partial collapse of January 1931 had opened a fissure in the eastern wall of the 4th level, approximately 40 feet below the main working face. Creasy's shift log for that week records the collapse in standard terms: debris cleared, Structural integrity assessed, no injury to personnel. Eastern drift temporarily closed pending reinforcement. Routine. The log entry for the following Tuesday is where the routine ends. It reads, Eastern drift reinforcement completed. Noted anomaly in lower wall. Will assess. The word anomaly appears once in 3 years of Creasy's shift logs. It does not appear again. What we know about what Creasy found comes from 2 sources. The first is a letter written in 1958 by one of the labourers he hired to do the ceiling, a man named Frank Polito, who was by then 67 years old and dying of emphysema in a rooming house in Connellsville. Polito wrote the letter to his youngest son, and it was preserved by the son's family until 2019, when a grandchild made it available to independent researchers. The second source is a partial transcript of a conversation recorded in 1947 by a journalist named Evelyn Marsh, who spent 2 years interviewing retired miners across southwestern Pennsylvania for a book that was never published. The transcript is in a private archive in Pittsburgh. Researchers have had limited access. From Polito's letter, Creasy showed us where to pour. He didn't take us all the way in. He took us to the mouth of it and no further. But I could see past him when he held the lamp up, and what I saw was not coal and it was not rock, the way I had always known rock to be. The walls were smooth. Not worn smooth. Made smooth. There were marks on them that I took at first for tool marks, but they were too regular and too deep and arranged in a pattern I had never seen in any mine in 20 years of mining. I asked Creasy what it was. He said it was old. He said it was older than anything we had a right to be standing next to. He said that was all I needed to know. From Evelyn Marsh's transcript attributed to an unnamed retired foreman who researchers believe to be Creasy himself, based on the timeline and geographic specificity, I went back 11 times before I made the decision to close it. 11 times over 3 winters. I mapped what I could reach. The passage ran level for perhaps 80 feet, and then descended at an angle I could not safely follow alone. At the 80-foot mark, there was a chamber, not large, perhaps the size of a farmhouse kitchen. The floor was flat, not packed earth, not poured material, flat stone fitted together without mortar, in a pattern that moved outward from the centre, the way ripples move from a dropped stone. In the centre of the floor was a circular depression, perhaps 4 feet across and 8 inches deep, filled with nothing, just a circle cut into the fitted stone. On the wall opposite the passage entrance there were 3 recessed openings, each perhaps 2 feet wide and 4 feet tall, sealed with a material I did not recognise. Not stone, not metal, something between the two in character, warm to the touch. Each one was carved above the opening with the same symbol. I did not recognise the symbol. I have never seen it in any book. I drew it. I still have the drawing. I will not describe it further. In April of 1934, Walter Creasy spent $462 sealing the passage at its mouth with reinforced concrete 3 feet thick. He used a mason named Benedetto Scarpelli from Uniontown who specialised in mine repair work. Polito's letter confirms that Scarpelli was told the passage was a methane risk and that the sealing was authorised by the company. It was not authorised by the company. Scarpelli had no reason to doubt a foreman on his own worksite. The work took 3 days. When it was finished, Creasy had Scarpelli's crew dress the surface of the seal to match the surrounding wall. If you did not know the passage was there, you would not know the passage was there. The Fayette Coal and Coke Company never questioned it. There is no record in the company archive of any inquiry into the Eastern Drift anomaly, no record of the sealing, and no record of Walter Creasy ever being asked to account for $462. The company was managing layoffs and equipment failures across 6 active shafts. A foreman who kept his section running without incident was a foreman who was left alone. Creasy worked the Harwick Number Four shaft for 9 more years. He retired in 1943 and died in Uniontown in 1951. His ledger passed to his daughter, who kept it with his personal papers without reading it carefully until she was sorting the estate. She noted the April 1934 entry and could make nothing of it. The ledger was donated to the Fayette County Historical Society in 1967, along with several boxes of miscellaneous papers. It sat in their archive uncatalogued for over 30 years. The Harwick Number Four shaft was decommissioned in 1959. The surface structures were demolished. The shaft head was capped with a standard concrete plug under Pennsylvania Department of Mines regulations. The property changed hands twice. It is currently undeveloped land in a drainage area that floods seasonally. No archaeological survey has ever been conducted on the site. No ground-penetrating radar work has been done on the lower sections. The concrete seal Creasy poured in 1934 is, as far as any available record indicates, still in place. This is where the pattern asserts itself. Because Walter Creasy in 1934 is not an isolated case in the coal country of southwestern Pennsylvania. He's a data point in a much longer sequence. In 1887, a miner named Dmitry Volkov, working a shaft near Brownsville, reported to his foreman a chamber below the working face, containing what he described as carved walls and a floor unlike anything in nature. The foreman's report to the company survives in the Brownsville Coal Company archive. The company sent an engineer to assess. The engineer's report does not survive. The shaft was sealed within 2 weeks, and Volkov was transferred to a different operation. In 1903, during the construction of a drainage tunnel near Connellsville, workers broke through into what the site engineer described in a letter to his brother as a corridor of dressed stone running perpendicular to our works, at a depth no construction crew had ever reached. The drainage tunnel was rerouted. The corridor was not documented in any official record. The letter to the brother was found in a family estate sale in 1994. In 1919, a survey team working for the Pittsburgh Coal Company reported an anomalous void beneath the Redstone seam at a depth inconsistent with any natural geological formation. The survey was reclassified as proprietary. The relevant section of the survey was removed from the company's public filing. The Pittsburgh Coal Company was absorbed into a larger operation in 1928. The proprietary survey records have not been located. 3 separate incidents across 3 separate decades in the same geographic basin, each involving a passage or chamber at depth that had no business being there, each sealed, reclassified, or quietly removed from the accessible record, and then Walter Creasy in 1934, doing privately and at his own expense what the institutions in 1887 and 1903 and 1919 had done with company resources and company authority. The question that distinction raises is an important one. Creasy was not acting on behalf of an institution. He was not following orders or protecting a corporate interest. He was a single man spending his own savings to seal something he had found alone, in silence, over 3 winters of private inspection, which means he had formed his own conclusion about what needed to happen, and his conclusion matched independently and without coordination the conclusion that the Pittsburgh Coal Company and the Brownsville Coal Company and the unnamed Connellsville engineering crew had each reached in their own time. Whatever was down there, a working man's instinct in 1934, told him the same thing that a corporate engineer's professional judgment had told him in 1887. Seal it. Do not describe it. Walk away. The Tartarian framework, as it has come to be understood among researchers willing to follow the physical evidence rather than the institutional narrative, proposes that the North American continent carries beneath its surface the infrastructure of a civilization that predates the historical record by a margin the official academic establishment has never been willing to openly address, not by centuries, by a span that, if honestly acknowledged, would require the rewriting of everything taught in every classroom on the subject of human history in the Western Hemisphere. The evidence for this framework does not come from speculation. It comes from exactly the kind of primary source material we have been examining in this investigation. The shift logs and the withdrawal records and the letters written by dying men to their children who had no reason to invent the details and every reason to simply leave the whole uncomfortable matter alone. It comes from the recurring description, across sites and decades and individuals with no connection to one another, of the same physical features: smooth walls, fitted stone floors, sealed recessed openings, carvings in a symbol set that no trained linguist or archaeologist has been permitted to study in sufficient depth to classify, a material that is warm to the touch and sits between stone and metal in its properties. These descriptions do not vary the way embellished accounts vary. They vary the way eyewitness accounts of the same physical reality vary, in detail and emphasis, but not in fundamental character. The mud flood hypothesis, which holds that a significant portion of this subsurface civilization was buried in a series of catastrophic geological and hydrological events in the relatively recent past, provides the most coherent explanation for why these features appear at the depths they appear at. Not at the bottom of 10,000 years of geological accumulation, but at depths reachable by a man with a carbide lamp and a canvas bag. Depths that a 19th century mining crew could break into by accident during an ordinary drainage project. These are not ancient features in the geological sense. They are ancient in the human sense, in the sense of a human civilization that rose, flourished, built with materials and techniques we do not have a modern classification for, and was then covered, not gradually, not by erosion, but by an event, or a series of events, catastrophic enough to bury a second story in mud and leave the first story sealed and intact 3 generations later for a Pennsylvania foreman to find with a lamp in the winter of 1931. Walter Creasy's ledger is in the Fayette County Historical Society archive. The April 14, 1934 entry is on page 47. The handwriting is neat. The ink has faded to the colour of old tea. The entry takes up 4 lines. The matter below the 4th level is settled. It will not trouble anyone now. He was not a man given to drama. Every other entry in that ledger is a practical record of a practical man's practical life. And then that one sentence, sitting between a note about a fence repair and a calculation of feed costs for a small kitchen garden, like a stone dropped into still water. He spent his savings. He swore the men to silence. He dressed the surface to match the surrounding wall. He went back to his shift records and his equipment logs and his twice-weekly inspections of the lower workings, and he never mentioned it again in any document that has been found. We do not know what he saw in those 11 visits over 3 winters. We do not know what the symbol above the sealed recesses looked like because he would not describe it, even to the journalist who came to him years later and listened without judgment. We do not know what is on the other side of a concrete seal poured in 1934 on land that now floods seasonally and has never been surveyed. What we know is that a man who spent his working life reading rock, reading seams, reading the underground the way a farmer reads weather, went down alone 11 times to look at something that did not belong to any world he had been taught to expect, and when he finally decided what to do about it, he did not call the company. He did not call the university. He did not call the newspaper. He went to his own bank, withdrew his own money, and handled it himself. There is something in that choice worth sitting with. A man who trusts no institution enough to hand it what he found. A man who concludes, alone, at the bottom of a sealed shaft in the worst year of the worst decade of the last century, that the right move is not disclosure, but containment. Not for the company, not for the government, for reasons he took with him and never gave to anyone in a form that survives. The concrete is still there. The ledger is still there. The land still floods every spring, and every spring the water recedes and the ground is still closed. But the record is never destroyed. It is only buried, and buried things have a way of surfacing when the conditions are right. Walter Creasy knew that better than anyone. He spent $462 in 1934 counting on the conditions never being right. He may have been wrong about that,